Okay, class, I want to talk to you about Chapter 3, which is a really important chapter in this book, because this is where we start to really control the items that get input to our database. And when your database is used by anyone, it's only as good as the data that is inside of it. So you want the data to be as clean as possible with little mistakes. So I had my customer table open in Design View, and I'm looking at the mums. This is the mums database. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. And Chapter 3, mums, in our book. So I'm going to open my customer, as it says, my customer table in Design View. And now I've got my screen resolution set up weird so that it's bigger so that you can see it on the video. So yours might look a little more stretched out. But what I'm looking at is I'm looking between the data, the fields, and the properties of that field. And each field has different properties. Now, we set the field size property in the first chapter. And now we're going to add some other fields and make those, set some validation rules, some required fields, that kind of stuff in here. So you can put your cursor in the first row. I'm trying to see. And we need to add a field called customer type. And I need it after customer name. I'm looking in the book, and so I'm going to put it right here. Well, let me check the book. Okay, so I'm looking at the book, and I'm remembering that this database, the customer information, was missing the city and state. So we have the address and we have the postal code, but we don't have the city and state. So I'm not going to worry about that. In a real database, this would be vitally important, but this is our practice database. So I'm going to put my cursor right here under addresses, and I'm going to insert a row, and this is going to be services needed. Whoops, click in there. Services needed. And this is short text, and I'm not going to worry or create something smaller because we're going to do something else with this one. But we need another field before we go and do that. We need another field. And our other field, I can click there and right click and choose insert row, or I can use that up there. I think I can use also my insert key on my keyboard and it will insert one. Total amount. Total amount. And I've put this in the wrong place because I need it to be after these two. So this is not a short text, this is a calculated field. Now, let me just do this. Let me build this, and then we'll move it, and then I'll talk about a calculated field. So this is going to be amount paid, so I double click and hit a plus sign and balance due. Or balance, and say okay. So there's my expression, and then I'm just going to go and grab this row and drag it down to here. Now the calculated field is a newer field. If you're working in an old database, you won't be able to do this because one of the rules of normalization says that you may not have a calculated field in a table. You may have a calculated field in a query, and that's the perfect place for it, or on a form or on a report, but not in a table itself. But Microsoft didn't agree with that, and perhaps the rules of databases, rules of normalization have changed. I don't know, I haven't investigated that. But one of our newer fields in Access is a calculated field, so we can do that right here. Some of the fields we already have. So I'm going to go to customer number, and I'm going to make this uppercase. And the customer name field is required. It should always appear, it says. And so what that means is it wants to make it required. And at this point, it is not required. So if we wanted to have a customer number without a name, this would be allowed in our table, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to change this no to yes. So now it's required. And the customer balance should never be greater than $1,000. The customer balance. So I'm going to go to the balance field, and it should never equal or exceed 1,000. So here's where we're going to write a rule. So there's two things to do with validation, and one of them is the rule that the computer needs, and then the text is what the human needs to understand the rule that the database is following. So if you have a rule, you always need to write text for that human. Okay, so our rule is should never be greater than 1,000. So we can say, let's say less than 1,000, which would be $9.99, right? I'm thinking. Less than, not equal to, because we don't want it to be equal to 1,000. We don't need a dollar sign. We don't need anything. That's for the computer, that rule. And the text is the balance, and this is what's going to pop up if they try to make it greater than 1,000. This is what's going to pop up. The balance should be less than 1,000. Now we can put in commas and dollar signs and stuff like that. The customer balance should never equal or exceed 1,000. Okay. Less than 1,000. Okay, good. So I'm going to, we still need to do two things. So we've created this, and I've saved these for later for a reason. So we've created this services needed field. And what we want is, and you can see in your book on page 199, that there are 5 services that we offer our customers: irrigation, landscaping, blah, blah. And we want to make this a drop-down list so that someone doesn't have to type something in. So for that wizard, that drop-down list is right here, the Lookup Wizard. And we are going to type them in ourselves because they don't exist in any other table. We're creating this list from the scratch. So next. Now, the book doesn't talk about this, but I want you to add 2 columns to this database. And the reason I want it is the first one's going to have that abbreviation, and the second one's going to explain what that abbreviation is. And, you know, not everybody is going to know what all of these abbreviations are, especially the user that is probably using this database is just the data inputter and may not understand all of the parts of your database. These need to be uppercase, and I'm not putting them in. PLT is plant maintenance, and I'm just using the tab key to go between these. I don't want to hit the enter key because that will mean go next. So I'm using the tab key, and this is plant maintenance. And the last one is TRE, which is tree pruning. Tree pruning. Now, I want to squish these columns up a little. I'm going to give this one a little more space. We can do this later. This top row, this column 1, column 2 will not be seen, so we don't have to worry about that. But let me show you where, if you want to change this later, where you do it. It's kind of hidden and you don't really realize it. So I'm going to say next. Where do you want which column do you want the information? We want the first column because that's where our abbreviations are. Next, and it's services needed. Now, because our customer can do more than one service, I mean, of course, we want them to use all 5 if they can, or if they need to. I'm going to allow this multiple values. This is kind of a new thing too, since about 2010 on. So this is kind of exciting. So we're not going to limit to the list because this will limit them to those 5 things. They have to use a check mark. So I'm going to say finish. And now we have our drop-down list. We'll go look at it in a second. But I want to talk about another drop-down list that your book does not talk about, and I want you to understand because it's so handy. So I'm going to go back to my Lookup Wizard. Now I'm in the supervisor number, right? And we have a supervisor table right here. So I'm going to go to the Lookup Wizard. And we're going to use this one. I want the lookup field to get the values from another table, that supervisor table. Next. And we're already in the customer table, so we don't want that one. We want the supervisor table. Next. And we want the supervisor number, because we want to show the number, and we want the first name and the last name. We do this because not everyone will have the supervisor numbers memorized. So if we don't have a name, the person who's filling out forms or something may leave this blank because they don't know who the supervisor is. So if we just do this one extra step and make a drop down that explains what those initials are, or whatever that supervisor number is, this is going to help keep our data clean. So do we want to sort it by any order? No, that's all right. It'll probably just come in. So here they are. I do not want to hide the key column. I want to see that supervisor number. And again, we're not going to see these. I'm going to make these a little bit smaller. I want to show you what happens when let me see if I can make it too small and we'll kind of miss the name. We're not going to see, again, we're not going to see this first row, so that doesn't matter. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that. Next. And it's the supervisor number, that's the lookup. That's what we want to show. And we do not want to allow multiple values. For goodness sakes, they only get one supervisor. So it's supervisor number, finish. The table must be saved before a relationship can be created. Yes. Now, what we're saying is data integrity rules have changed. Existing data may not be valid. So this isn't from the thing we just did. This comes from the saving down here in our validation rules. So when we set up our rule, we set it up for it must be, the balance must be less than 1,000. That's right. So one of our customers that already exist may be different than that. So it's saying, okay, you told me that this is the validation, but now you're changing it. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. So now let's go here. And here's our services needed. So we can check whatever box we want. So now you can see I have to scroll. I don't want to have to scroll to do this. So I'm going to show you where to go fix that. And then I'm going to close this up here. And then when I go all the way down here, balance, there is no balance greater than 1,000. So let me try to put in something in here greater than 1,000. And here's our error message that we chose. The balance should be less than 1,000. Okay, so let me just escape out of that and bring it back to 675. Good. And now here is our supervisor number. Well, who's 26? Ah, there's the name, Jen Febo. And they're in their first name and last name. So we can't see Martinson here. So again, let me show you how to fix these things and make them bigger once they're too small, or once they're not big enough to see here. So I'm going to go back to Design View, and I'm going to go to Services Needed. And now here is, we have a lookup. So we can go to this lookup, and here, if I wanted to add something to our lookup list, I could go here to the end of pruning, and I could put a semicolon, and then I could say, I don't know, what else do we do with lawn care? Oh no, we already have lawn care. Landscaping. Okay, let's say weeding. Weeding. Well, that looks funny, doesn't it? Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. So I'm looking how they have formatted this, and then we have another semicolon, and then another quote, weeding, end quote. And now we've just added to our list. Now our column widths are currently this, and we can make them longer. I'm going to make it 0.5. And so if we have two columns, I'm going to make it 1.5 here. And so our overall length has to be these two things together. So I'm going to make it 2.0 inches. I'm leaving that tiny little quote, 2.0 inches. Okay. Now let's go to supervisor number, same thing. So this is saying coming from the supervisor table, supervisor number, supervisor name, first name. So that's all explained up there. We don't have to type anything in there. But I want my column width. I have 3 of them. I could make them a little bit bigger. Let's make this 7.5. And let's make this overall, 2 also. We'll make it 2 inches. And we'll make this 0.5. Let's see if this works a little bit better. Okay. So let's see what this looks like. Save the table, yes. So now when we do this, okay, it's a little bit bigger. No scrolling. And there's weeding, right? We added it right in there. Okay, you don't have to. It wasn't in the book, but if you want to, go ahead and try. And then here are all of the people's names. Oh yeah, that looks good. Okay? So I want you to do this, even though the book doesn't tell you to. I want you to add this to your database. I expect to see the supervisor number as a drop-down with the people's names, first name, and then their last name. And your name is in here too. You added yourself somewhere in there in chapter 1. All right, I'm going to stop. You will finish doing the rest of it. I just wanted to talk about validation and the backside, and this video might even be too long for me to upload to YouTube. We'll see. Okay, see you online.